Okay, welcome everyone. So we got our first question in the Q&A. Thank you, Carrie. Matthew, if they come in slower, and Jana, if they come in slower, we can go ahead and answer all of them out loud. I think that's probably the best move for this. But if you want to give them some supplemental data or places where videos are that can enhance the answer, things like that, feel free to go ahead and post those back into the Q&A. So the first question is document templates. So I'm diving in to organize my document templates today and starting to think what happens when you need to trigger a document to appear or be removed based on an intake form. So the way this works right now is going to be a complete document template for every trigger. So like if septic is yes, bring in my entire septic document template. We're not able to do individual placeholders at this time. It's just going to be the whole folder. So that document template is going to become a folder in your backend in the documents tab. So if you have 5 triggers, you'll have 5 different folders with a bunch of different placeholders in that folder. So let's just give you an example. So let's say it's septic. If septic is yes in the intake form, go ahead and trigger my document template to come in for compliance. That compliance folder that's coming into the documents is going to be named septic. And then underneath that, you may have a septic addendum. Maybe you have a septic sketch for a map. Maybe you have like some kind of county filing, and you have all those placeholders under there so that when you get those documents, you can just upload them to the existing placeholder. Those existing placeholders, best practice is create everything you're going to need for compliance plus anything else. Maybe put the compliance folders or the placeholders towards the top, the ones that are optional towards the bottom. You can use, actually, let me just share my screen because it might be easier to show you an example of this. Hold on one second. Let me just log into my demo account real quick. I forgot to do that. And I will share my screen and show you kind of a best practice here. Sorry, I have 2-factor authentication on here, so I got to type in my code to get this to work. Let's see. Okay. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm going to go over to a transaction here. Let me just pick one that I know I have some stuff in. And so when those document templates come in, they're going to come over to the documents tab and they're going to come in as a folder. So this is one document template right here. This folder XYZ, that would be a separate document template that came in. This one's a separate document template that came in. So as these come in, let's say this is septic and you have all the different documents that maybe these first 2 you actually need for compliance. Best practice would be to make the first 2 missing in your template. So when it comes in here, you have these 2 missing and it actually translates up to here to show you a number of missing documents that you still need for compliance. Now this one may be an optional document. So maybe you don't check missing on this because you don't care if you get it or not. Or maybe it's something that you may, excuse me, you may or may not need. It could become a required document in the future. When it does become a required document, then you can mark it M. You could also come up here to these file buttons and you could create another one for like, let's just say optional. So you could do this. And then in your template, go ahead and add that. And then over here, you have the ability to mark this one as like an optional. So hopefully that answers your question. If not, go ahead and post up more details, but that's best practices for document templates and coming in from the intake form. So it's just like a regular intake form trigger. If something is true or something is yes, then put in this document template to the folder or to the transaction, sorry. All right, next question. Can you explain a little better how the trigger file role conditions works? Trigger file role conditions works.
Yeah, that's the whole like a file must exist to process the condition.
Right. You want to go ahead and take that one?
Why don't you take it? I think you probably know it a little bit better than I do.
Okay, so let me go back over here to file conditions.
Yeah, go into that global setting really quick. Sorry, maybe I do know it. So this is for anybody that has triggers inside of their account. It would be, I think it's in the default, right? Yeah, trigger. Yeah, there you go.
Right here. Yeah. So actually, it was right where I was actually in the documents. So these file role conditions. So actually, let me read the rest of the question here. So Carrie said, I have to set that up. No file must exist to process conditions. And yet when I have a file role, but no digital file, the trigger does not work. Am I understanding how this works correctly? Yes, you are. So to go over this a little bit more in detail for everyone else, you have a couple of different options. So let's start at the beginning. So the first thing we're going to do is go to document templates. And so in document templates, and let's just go into one of these, okay? In here, you can preset a file role. So that's the flame. If I have a file role in here, and the reason to preset a file role is because when I stick a document in here, I don't want to have to go to every single document that I upload, find the purchase contract, and then assign it. Okay, that would be what you would have to do if you didn't have this preset. So having it preset does save you some time. The problem that we saw with that was when a file role is set, our conditions are constantly looking for that. So smart block conditions, just regular trigger conditions, it's saying, does this file exist or not exist? Well, the way the system tells it if it exists or not is the file role. So if you have this preset with no file in here, it's still triggering your actions. It's saying, yeah, go ahead and put that smart block in about the purchase contract. We don't want that to happen because there's no document in here. So to save time, you're going to go ahead and preset that file role. But then you're going to come over to your global conditions like we showed you and say, don't process the trigger unless a file exists in there. And the way that you can tell that is to come back over to the, back over here to the transaction I was in. And there's going to be a paperclip next to the file. And so you can tell that there's a document in here. So if this, let me find one that doesn't have one. Okay, here. So this counteroffer number one, we've preset this file role here, but there's no document in here. And you can tell that because this paperclip is grayed out. Because this paperclip is grayed out, it's not going to process that condition. So if you have a condition over on a smart block that says, if counteroffer number one fully executed exists in the property, go ahead and put this smart block in. Well, what that global setting is going to do is it's going to say for the system to look and see if this is set, but then also come over here and look and see if there's an actual file in here. If the file's in here, it's not going to, oh, I'm sorry. If the file's in here, it's not going to process the trigger. If the file is in here like this one, it will process the trigger. So hopefully that was enough definition around that. But if you have any further questions, go ahead and post it up. Do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, that looked good.
Okay. All right. Again, put your questions in Q&A if you have questions. Is there a way to set up a series of questions that will populate for a property and be saved in the proper place? Ideally, that I can fill out and tab to the next field. For example, who is the listing agent? Who is the buyer's agent? Currently, I'm seeing all of the fields, some of them needed, some of them not, and then have to separate, go to contacts section. Okay, so give me a little bit more detail on this. So is this when you're filling out when you're creating the property from an intake form, is that the location you're talking about, the second approval stage where all the fields are in there for the TC to fill out before it becomes a transaction? Is that what I'm understanding?
I think what he or she has going on here is that they're just filling out a property field, or they're filling out a property inside of it. And by default, it just shows all the fields.
Yes.
What this user is wanting is to have an intake form that basically is dynamic.
Yeah, so here, let me show you both. So new property, this is the manual way to do it. Let me just grab something here. And you can correct this if we're wrong here. Let's see here. Okay, so once you get past this screen, you set a property template or not, whatever, you come over to this other screen. I think what you're seeing is like, you're having to tab through all of these things to fill out the appropriate information. This is definitely not the best way to do it. This is a way that you may do it when you first get on the program because you're used to doing it manually somewhere else. But the goal is to get over to intake forms. And the reason you want to get over to intake forms is because now I can dynamically trigger things to happen. So if I come over to my intake forms and go to templates and go to intake forms, and let's go to, I don't know which one is here. Let's go to this one. Then you can come in here and say, I only want my agents to see these fields. I only want the fields to be required to my agent to be these red ones. And so you can go down through here and do all those. I only want my TC to see these green ones, and I want these ones to be required that my TC fills out before it becomes a transaction. So green is visible, red is required. So once you do this, now you can come into, so basically what your question was is form conditions. And form conditions is if it's a seller, then go ahead and add this field, this field. You know, you can add a bunch of fields that will be visible in the intake form based on something else that's happening. So only if it's a seller, show these fields. Only if it's a buyer, show these other fields. Let me delete these out because I'm not sure what this goes to. But also you could do things like, is it a referral? If it's a referral and that's checked yes, then ask my agent who's filling this intake form out, what's the referring percentage and who's the referring agent, and maybe to upload a referral agreement. So, and you can do that on the agent side filling out the form, or you can just have your TCs fill out the form internally. And the way they would do that is they would just come over here to add property, intake form, and we'll pick one that's already done here. Let's just go to this one, hit process. And now this would be your TC seeing this. And sorry, we're on Zoom, so it's going to take forever. But there you go. So now they would come in here and they would choose the team and the user. They could assign it to an agent because the agent's not automatically assigned, like if the agent filled it out from their portal. And then you could come down here and let me pick a question that hopefully there's a question in here that will make something else come in. Let me see. I think there's a referral at the bottom. Let's see here. Maybe I don't have anything in here. Let's see, occupant type. No, I must have done this one just to be like a quick one. But anyway, you could have, let's say this question is there a referral? And you hit the yes button, 2 more fields could pop in directly under this asking for more information. Or is there a home warranty? Then I need the home warranty details. Is it septic? I may need the septic details. Is it well? Add the well details. But what you can do is keep this form super slim for the agent or the TC, so they're not filling out a bunch of stuff or seeing a bunch of stuff that they don't naturally need to. But if they check the button that says yes, then the extra information will come in. Now, another way to do this is on the intake form. Oh, and I got off there. But on the intake form, another way to do it is through triggers. What you can say is if septic is yes, add in my septic fields to the transaction, add in my septic documents, add in my septic, you know, what, so on and so on. You can do all that through the intake form. So hopefully, anonymous attendee, whoever you are, that answered your question. And if you want to dig in further, I'm sure Matthew can help you out through the Q&A chat. All right. What are some ways to use tags strategy? So interesting. So tags right now are very basic level, but in the future, I think there's going to be a lot more add-ons to tags to give you some ability on automation. But just for now, let's talk about the current structure of tags. So there's tags in contacts where you can tag them as maybe an inspector, or maybe you can actually, let's just go screen to screen here so no one gets confused. So over in your contacts, you can go in Bob Barker, and then here are a bunch of tags. So black, blue, compliance, you know, these are just some test tags we put in there, but you can assign tags to a person, you know, based on who they are. You can clear the tags, you can manage them, you can make them different colors, you can delete them, whatever you want to do. So you may have some tags that, you know, inspector, maybe home warranty person, maybe it's, maybe they were a buyer at one time, maybe they always want you to send out post-closing emails. I don't know. It's endless, the things that you could put on tags. So you can tag your people. You can also tag like documents. So let's go over to a transaction and let's go to, sorry, let me go to transaction, go to this transaction. Okay. Okay, so in the transaction here, you can also tag documents. So if I come into this document, and we're going to probably expose these a little bit more on the outside screen in the future, but for right now, you can come in here and also tag documents. So maybe it's missing initials, missing signatures, things like that. So anywhere else there's tags, Shane, that I'm not thinking of currently?
Yeah, there's tags inside of tasks. There's tags inside of
Right. So over in tasks,
contact has tags now.
yep. So let me open that up. Okay, so yeah, you can tag these. And the reason why these ones are important on the tasks is because if you come over to like the task pipeline and you're trying to sort your data, now you can come over here and sort it by just show me all my tasks that are on 1, 2, 3 Happy Lane that have to do with closing or have to do with inspection. And when I click on this, and I don't know what tags are in here, but if I click on this, it's going to sort it by just the items with this tag on it. So all these items have this tag inspection on it. So then I can get rid of that and reload everything. So then you can come up here and do snapshots, and you can come through here and say, well, I want this user that is buyers for this user that are active and have the inspection tag on them. And then you can save that snapshot as a name. So like you could name it something that you're going to remember, and you could put all these in kind of a time blocking order so that during the beginning of the day, you can come over here, click on the first snapshot, take care of those tasks, click on the second snapshot, take care of those tasks, and maybe make these from highest importance to lowest importance. So, but anyway, tags, I think tags in the next probably year or so will grow immensely, but we're not going to go into how yet until we do some testing and figure out all the different ways that it can save you time.
Yep.
And if hopefully that answered your question, Jana's on that one, so she can help you with further applications for that. Are you able to walk through trigger templates in your system and how they get applied? I set up trigger templates and I'm looking to see how to create automation. Is this applied at the intake form level? Yeah, so Erica, you hit it. That's the best way. So I apologize, there's jets flying over me right now. So if you hear some stuff in the background, that's what it is. Okay, let me find a task template, or I'm sorry, an intake form template. I'll go in here. Yeah, we'll go to conditions. And so the first step to this would be creating your trigger templates. And now, actually, let me bounce over here because this does get a little confusing. When you're adding a new trigger template, let's just name it whatever. When you come to this section, if you've been in the program a long time, this is self-explanatory. Intake form triggers, those are the triggers that come up in your intake form templates. Task triggers, those are the triggers that get attached to tasks that if I check off this task, I want this email to send out, or I want this text message to go out. Property triggers are the automated triggers that we talk about that are going to be standalone triggers with their own conditions. So you always want to select this if we're talking about the automated triggers, and then you can go ahead and create a template. Now what it's going to do over here is it's going to tell you what type of template it is. So these are tasks, these are intake form, these are properties. So let's go over to, let me go down here to test one, see if I have anything in here. So you would come in here and you would create your first trigger. You would say, whoops, sorry. You would say, I want to send an email when these things are true. I want to send a text message. I want to add or remove a template. I want to add or remove a field section or add or remove a field. So those are your options. Now, when you select one of those, let's just say it's email. I want to send an email, and then you would create the trigger, or let's say template, because I already have one here. It would pop over here. You can turn it on or off if you're working on it. You can leave it off while you're working on it. This button is going to extend that so I can see everything down here. You can create a condition. So, you know, if contract status is equal to funded and recorded, then what do I want to happen? I want this template to come on, and maybe this template is post-closing task. So as soon as it's funded and recorded, I want to put in my post-closing template that's like, hey, how you doing in the new house, or just a weekly follow-up, or whatever you guys do on your team. You can set all that. Now, the way to get, and what I recommend as far as these templates is the same thing as like a task template. You're creating these templates to be small. So you don't want a task template or a trigger template to be every single task that you do during a transaction. You want to break them into little pieces so that you can automate these. What I don't want to happen is you get into a transaction and it's cash, and it's a quick close, it's a 10-day close cash deal, and you have 210 tasks that don't apply to the transaction, what you can do now is you can come in here and create these task templates or trigger templates and say, I want to make an inspection one. So if the inspection isn't waived, these tasks will come in. If the appraisal isn't waived, another small section of appraisal tasks will come in. So you're going to break them up into things that can come in and out of the transaction based on what's happening. So if septic is yes, bring in my septic triggers. If HOA is yes, bring in my HOA triggers or tasks. So you're only bringing in the things you need to see. What you don't want is your TC to get in there and see 160 tasks when only 20 of them have to be completed. It's just a complete waste of time and way less efficiency. So create these templates very small. So what that's going to do is that's going to tie into the next thing I'm going to show you, which is in the intake forms. And let's just scroll down here and we'll say, we'll do this one. Come over to form conditions, or I'm sorry, form triggers. And now we can say, if septic is yes, put in my septic trigger template. So let me see if I have any in here. If finance is equal to yes, these are field sections. So these would be loan details, loan dates. But I also may have one that says, if finance is equal to yes, bring in my finance tasks, bring in my finance triggers, bring in my the documents I need for compliance when it's a finance deal. So you can automate this whole process just by someone checking the button yes to finance. So hopefully that answered your question, Erica. Okay, Carrie, we had a call with Carrie the other day and she was had a lot of questions. And so she just said, trigger templates, that was a missing piece. That totally connected many things for me. So I'm happy that did. For what you're talking about now is the only on the more expensive package. Yeah, so let me break down the packages. So the way they work is, let me come over here. And these are going to change names, but the gist of these plans are going to stay the same. We're actually adding a couple things. So the premium plan, which will be soon the pro plan, that's $69 per user. What you get on that is 2 intake forms. And then I think we're going to up that. So you may see more ability in the future for that. So 2 intake forms currently. You're also going to have 3 triggers per task. So in a task template with the premium plan currently, you're going to have the ability to add triggers. And you're going to be able to add 3 triggers in each task. So if I check off this task, I want 3 things to happen, whether that's send an email, send a text, add a template, whatever you're doing, you can do 3 actions per task. Mm-hmm. Now, when you upgrade, so the plans are $0 base plus $69 per user. That's the premium. If you go to the premium add-on, it's $99 base fee plus $69 per user. Now that one, you're going to get unlimited intakes, unlimited smart blocks, unlimited triggers per task, just a lot of unlimited stuff. There's also, let me scroll down the bottom here. You can see everything that's listed on the $99 upgrade. That's not $99 per person, it's per organization per month up to 10 users. Unlimited intakes, let's see here. Scheduled automation triggers, I think we added that to the base plan now, so we'll update that. Automatically send client portals. Dynamic field coloring, so you can turn this green if it's active, turn it red if it's closed. Smart blocks are unlimited, task triggers are unlimited, straight payments, so you can invoice people if you're a TC agency. One sheets are unlimited instead of, I believe, 3 per transaction. And then don't worry about file storage. But so that's the big difference. Now, on some of the things I'll show you, and when I say the fully automated plan or what's now the pro plan, which will be the scale plan, what you're going to get is the ability to lock down tasks. So don't let my TC check this off unless these things are true. So maybe you have to add a contact or you have to upload a document before you can check off this task. You can come in here and create a condition so that your TC can't actually accidentally check off this task before these conditions are done. The other thing you're going to have is the ability to create those triggers, the automated triggers that I was talking about before. You're going to have the ability to come in here and say, so this is next level, right? This is going to take the place of tasks. So you're going to say, instead of having a task to send all the initial emails, you might have one that says, send the buyer email if the buyer exists, if I represent the buyer, if X, if Y, if Z, you can have a bunch of different conditions down here. As soon as those conditions are true, the system's going to tell you, hey, send the opening email to the buyer. So instead of your TCs having to constantly go over to a task list and check off those tasks and go into each transaction every day, all you're going to need to do is set up these listening conditions. Basically, they're listening for these to become true. As soon as all these conditions become true, it's going to tell you when to do things instead of you having to go tell the task when to do things. So if I check off this task, send these 2 emails, now you're just going to have 2 emails in your triggers. And as soon as the conditions are true, it's going to actually alert you and say, hey, these are ready to send. Huge time savings. It'll take your business, it'll probably cut your time in half. From how much time you're spending on transactions now. But it is an extra, well, if you're on the $99 plan, it's only an extra $200 a month. If you're on the base plan, it's an extra $299 a month. And those plans will be released here probably in the next 30 days. So I know we were supposed to charge for those as of today. You guys are getting a free reprieve for another 30 days because we didn't get to it. So triggers are free for another 30-ish days.
Yeah, one of the things that we're waiting on right now is just getting our DocuSign integration finalized with DocuSign. It's taken longer than I'd hoped for, but once we have DocuSign all wrapped up on that, then we'll be releasing those plans, as well as we're extending more webhooks on that as well. So that'll be added into there too.
Yeah, those features are going to be, those are great. Yeah, it's going to give you a lot of flexibility. Okay. The question and answer board is filled by Carries today. Lots of Carrie questions. Sorry, more to follow up on the trigger template. What would be the difference in setting up trigger templates versus just having just triggers happen off certain things in the intake form? Yeah, big difference. So think of the intake form as when the transaction is starting. And let me read the rest of the question, make sure I answer everything. I have lots of triggers happening based on the intake, but I haven't done any trigger templates. Okay, that's fine. So if you're talking about intake form trigger templates, then all it is, Carrie, is the ability to create maybe like 5 forms that are similar, but they're different, and then not have to go through and create all those conditions every single time. You can just apply a intake form trigger to it, and all the triggers that you have in that template will just fill in the intake form. Now, if you're talking about the automated triggers, what's the difference between having automated triggers and the triggers that are coming off the intake form? The big difference is intake form triggers only happen once off of the intake form. So off the questions on the intake form, it's saying, add this template, add this template, add this field section. It's going through that whole list, but nothing's happening after the transaction's already started. Now with the trigger templates, what you can have is, let me go over to a, let me go back to, let me see if I can find that transaction anywhere. Nope. Okay. And just so you know, I've been kind of doing this a long way. If you just click here, you can actually open up the file drawer right from here. Or I'm sorry, I wanted to open up the documents instead. I can open the documents from here. I don't have to go over and click 5 times. It's going to take me right to the documents. So the difference is, let's go over to triggers. So these triggers live after the transaction. So you apply this template or you have it come in from the intake form. And now all these things are listening for things to happen afterwards. So if I don't have the earnest money receipt and it's 2 days after the file's been created, I want to send an email out to the buyer saying, hey, buyer, what the heck's going on? You got to get your earnest money over. You're going to be out of compliance on this contract, and the seller may or may not have the ability to cancel that contract. So I don't want to have to remember to do that. So basically what I'm saying is, hey, 2 days after intake, these don't make sense, but 2 days after file setup, if I don't have, my condition might be, if the earnest money receipt is not uploaded, or if the earnest money number is not filled in my fields. Those could be samples of different conditions you might have. If that's true, and it's 2 days after the file was created, I want to send out an email to my buyer warning them that they're out of compliance and they need to get that information over to the title company ASAP. So that's the difference, is all of these live after the transaction started. And this is the way I run my whole business. So we don't run off tasks, we run off triggers. And they're constantly just listening to alert me when things need done. And so I don't have people coming over to tasks every day and every single transaction, or going to that task pipeline and trying to clear off that task list every single day. I'm just waiting for the triggers to pop up in my health bar here and tell me, yep, these ones are ready to go. And then we go ahead and take care of those. So hopefully I covered both, just in case you were thinking one or the other, Carrie. Hopefully that answered both those questions. Okay. task conditions are really useful, even just for me on my own. I have things that need to be updated on my details tab before I want to complete the task. So the conditions work amazingly for that. So what she's talking about is what I just showed you. And that was in the task. Oh, I'm in the task, my bad. In the tasks, and then we'll go ahead and expand these. We should really tell Zoom to upgrade their system. All right, let me click off here and click back on, see if I can get this to work a little faster. Okay, there we go. So let me go ahead and open these up. So this button right here collapses or opens all of the tasks at one time, or you can do this on a singular level here. So just for context. Over here are the conditions she's talking about. So if I come over here and I say, before this task is complete, I need to fill out my field. And I want to fill out, let's see, let's say legal description. And then we could say, oops, is not blank. Okay. So if the legal description isn't blank, I can proceed with this task. Okay, right now it's red. That means that I cannot complete this task until I do this. So I could come over here and I could try to check off this task, and it's going to give me an error. It says one or more of your conditions have not been met, so you can't check off this task. This is great for young TCs that are coming in brand new, that you're teaching how to do the job, because they're not going to be able to check something off without taking care of things. So like this one, right? Yeah, that was the condition for, wait, did I put the condition in the right one? No. Okay. Let me just make sure this is the right one. Yep. Okay. So there's your condition right there. So now if I come over to, I don't even know where this field is. Let's see if I can find legal description somewhere. I might not even have it in my, let me do this.
Try Control G.
Yeah, I think I have to add it first, actually. Manage property fields. I think it's up in this top one here. Yeah, oh, it's in there. Okay. Oh, I don't do that. Okay, so Control G, if you hit Control G, it's going to pull up a search for the fields, type in legal description. It's going to pop up here. I can actually go ahead and fill it in right here and check this box. And now it's going to save that field. And now my condition should be green. Did that work? I don't know where that field is. Anyway, if you filled in legal description, this is going to turn green and give you the ability to check this off. So that's what she's talking about as far as conditions. So every task, and that's only on the automation plan, that's on the scale plan that's coming out. So that will be on our top tier plan to have that ability. So, okay. As much as I love all the huge advances you're making, moving everything forward, little things that make life a big game changer. Let's see. Yeah, feel free to submit anything you need to support, and they'll put it on the roadmap for the future. We go through all the different suggestions on features every quarter, and then we make a quarterly roadmap, and those are the things that are getting done that quarter. We only have so much capacity, so we're aware that there's like 5 million suggestions in there. We pick the ones that we think are going to have the biggest impact based on how many times people are reaching out about them, and those are the things that are getting added. All right. Where do all the inactive triggers live? Conditions not met. Do we need to clear them out? No, you don't need to clear them out. It depends on where you're talking about. So if you're talking about in the automation triggers, all the inactive are under here. So you can come under here and you can see the ones that are inactive. Now, if I turn this on, it's going to leave this inactive, and it'll probably take forever since we're on Zoom, but you can see that went to 0. And now you just refresh my page here. And now there's nothing in there. So if I go back over to in process and turn this one off, and then I go over to inactive, you'll see it pop back in there. So that's where the inactives live.
Yeah, and if conditions are met, those live in the in process.
Yeah.
Anytime a condition is met, or a condition is, all the conditions are met and the date is today, or past due, it goes into ready to go. If it's immediate, then it'll go in there. But conditions have to be met for it to be put into the ready to go or immediate column. if it's 2 days out, 3 days out, 4 days out, but conditions are met, it'll always go into scheduled.
Yeah, so just to piggyback on what he just said, here's in process. You can see at least one of these conditions on every single one is going to be red. Okay. So conditions aren't met. They're just living in here. As soon as I upload that purchase contract, this is going to bounce over to ready to go. The immediate are immediate. So they're going to have that immediate tag on them. These two combine to make the ready to go. So these are ones that have the immediate send immediately as soon as all the conditions are met. So as soon as this condition's met, immediately send this out or immediately notify me. They're living in here. These are ones that are scheduled. So it's like 2 days before closing. If all the triggers or if all the conditions are met, then alert me. These two combined for ready to go. So if you're working in these, the place you're going to be most is just ready to go. These are the ones that are ready to go. You can inspect these in the health bar and send these emails out, get them taken care of. This is interesting. This one right here, when the intake form comes in, if you're like, that intake form came in and I feel like I'm missing some fields or something, you can always go to that, and no intake was performed to start this transaction. But if there was, it would be all your intake form triggers here, and you can see why they did not trigger. So very helpful. If you're having any doubts on what happened during that intake, come in here and see which ones were submitted, which intake approval triggers are in here. So.
And can I piggyback on that, Andrew, on just when you're looking at doing a lot of conditional logic, especially when you're starting out your tasks and triggers, look at your intake form to control what fields you're approving. You can actually have in there for the internal instructions, hey, let's double check this field before we approve that intake, just to ensure that the core fields that you're basing your processes on are filled out before you start digging in. I don't know if we want to kind of touch on that, but any fields that you're doing condition logic for when you're beginning your transaction, that's where I would likely incorporate those.
So Jen, are you talking about in the, sorry, I was reading a question, so I didn't catch all of your, what you were saying, but here, let me close this and let me come over to, are you talking about in the intake form? Or are you talking about, okay, so let me see here. Let me go to the templates. Oops, sorry, templates. And let's go to the intake forms. And we'll just go in, let's just come down here to this one. Okay, so you're talking about here, or are you talking about over in the fields that are coming in from here and here?
I would say both. Anything that you absolutely need, you can have required here on this tab if it's every time. And then it's actually what you showed in form conditions, where if you're pulling in additional date fields or day fields, you can have those in the internal instructions for the TC to confirm before we approve.
Yeah, so think of the form conditions as a form builder. So these are the fields that are going to come in live while the agent or the TC is filling out that intake form. So if that agent says, yes, there's a septic system, this septic inspection field is going to pop in real time as they're filling it out. The form conditions are, you can trigger fields to come in after. So if the agent said referral received is yes, then go ahead and add all these field sections. This doesn't make sense, but it would usually be like, if septic is yes, add my septic field section. If well is yes, add my wells field section. So you can trigger these. Now, the thing about these fields, I think Jana was touching on there, was, do you want these internally required? So internally required means the TC has to fill them out. So be real careful about making this a yes, because the TC has to fill all these fields out. So if you have a field section, and let's say there's 50 fields in that field section, that TC is required to fill out all of those 50 fields if you check yes here before it becomes a transaction, before. So that doesn't typically work out. This is used in very select circumstances. So when in doubt, say no. They'll come into the transaction, but they won't be required for the TC to fill out every single field in this field section. Now, sometimes what you do want to do is like an individual field. So I don't know if I have individual fields in here, but you may want to like say, if this is yes, bring in this one field that the TC has to fill out before it becomes a transaction. So, and then even to go further with that, if you want to go even further with it, you come over to a transaction. And this is probably one of the cooler things in the program. If you come to triggers and you're on the upgrade of an upgrade plan, you're going to be able to have listeners. These triggers never leave. These triggers are constantly listening. So let's say you had one that said, bring in these fields if it's a buyer, and then take out these fields if it's not a buyer. You could literally come over here and say buyer, change it to not a buyer, and they would leave. And you change it to buyer and they would come back in, and you change it to not a buyer and it would go back out. So like these fields are popping in and out of the transaction based on whatever your condition is. And when, best practice is if you're creating listeners, create a positive and a negative, something that's opposite. So if it's a buyer or it's a seller, or if it's a buyer and not a buyer, whatever you choose to do, just make sure if you change this, you want them to come in. And if you change it again, you want them to go out, come back in, go back out. So you can do that as many times as you want. This is good for like, if you change something, you're like, oh crap, I didn't mean to change it to buyer. This is a seller. And you change it back to seller. You want the right fields to come back in now that are needed for that transaction. So, okay. Hopefully, I was told the only triggering that can be done is in task triggers. How do you set up regular triggers? Can you walk through it again? Yeah, so it is a little confusing, the trigger talk, because we call a lot of different things are triggers, right? Intake form. It's anything that's triggering that asset. So like if septic is yes in an intake form, I want to trigger, my condition is if septic is yes, my trigger is add these assets. And those assets may be a document template that has to do with septic, a task template that has to do with septic, a trigger template that has to do with septic. So you can trigger more than one thing as long as their documents, fields and documents have to be separate, or, those types of templates. But basically, if septic is yes, I can trigger the document template, the task template, and the trigger template all in one trigger. Now, I think the confusion is when you contact support, a lot less of the percentage of the user base is using automated triggers right now. So they tend to speak in Pro and Grow, which are bottom two plans. And so when they say you can only trigger done in task templates, they may have looked at the plan that you're currently on and are speaking to you individually versus a global, those are all the triggers. So the way you can do triggers is through the intake form, through the tasks, which you already know about, and then this automated trigger portion, which is you have to upgrade your plan to get to it. But basically, these are replacing tasks. So any task you have, let's say you check off the task and an email goes out, how you would turn that into a trigger is you would just create an email trigger and then create your conditions. If septic is yes, send this email. And now you can just get rid of that task out of your template and slowly transform over to the system using automated triggers instead of using a task-based system. So I wouldn't do that unless you're super confident in the way you have your system set up. I would get your system set up so that it's running very smooth, and then do this on a template by template basis. So let's take this template of tasks and turn them all into triggers. Then let's go to my septic template and turn those into triggers. Then let's go to my well template and turn those into triggers. Do them one by one, test them as you go so that you're not adding 80 new things to your system and then one thing doesn't work and you can't figure out why. So just be real careful with those. Carrie said to add, bearing in mind that a lot of the automated task triggers are triggers based off of fields in the details tab, it's really important that they are completed when a task is finished. So the conditions work in tandem with the triggers really well. Yeah, as you get more into these automated triggers, and I don't want to go super deep on this, but as you get more into these triggers, you're going to find that you're adding a couple extra fields from what you normally would have, because fields are great triggers for these. So like I said, I'll give you an example. If my buyers have got the escrow money, the earnest money over to the escrow company yet. So sometimes they just call me and say, hey, I'm headed over there at 5 o'clock. Well, my trigger may be set, my condition may be set to if this document exists, if the escrow, receipt was given to me. Well, that's not a good indication because I may not have it until the next morning if they're delivering it right at 5 o'clock. So you could create another field called, has the earnest money been arranged? Now you can change that from a yes to no and trigger your conditions. So you could say, if your buyer calls you and says, hey, I'm going to have it over there at 5 o'clock. Well, I'm going to trust that they are. And so I'm just going to change that to, has it been arranged? Yes. They understand how to get that money over to the escrow company. So when I change that to yes, then I can trigger everything off that yes and no. Now I can say, has earnest money been arranged? no, go ahead and put that paragraph in my email explaining how to get it over there. If it's a yes, don't put that in the email and make me look stupid that I don't know what's happening in the transaction. So as you get more into these triggers, you're probably going to be adding, you know, a dozen more fields to trigger everything that needs to happen. So, let's see here. Yeah, so what Carrie's saying, she said to be a little bit more clear on that, example would be that if I clear off my appraisal task as being completed, I would have to change appraisal on the details tab to being completed in order to trigger my emails saying, hey, appraisal completed to the buyer, to the whoever. The conditions on the task stop me from forgetting to change the details. So yeah, exactly. Those conditions are great because you have to update the field to get things to work properly. Now, to skip a step in that example, you may just say, I'm trying to think of an example, but like you could trigger things off of something other than a field too. You could trigger it off of the appraiser being present in the transaction, or you could trigger it off of the appraisal document being uploaded to the transaction. So a lot of different ways you can do it. You can do it by fields, you can do it by contacts, and you can do it by documents. So, you know, get creative as you do this, and you can think of a lot of ways to save yourself mega time in the transaction. All right. Is it best to have the intake form templates come in when the agent submits or approve, or at final approval from the TC? Yeah, it's 50-50, Erica. Honestly, it depends on the actual trigger. So let me give you an example. If the agent says it's a residential purchase contract in Arizona and we're using our standard form, then I want to go ahead and trigger my date template for a standard form contract in Arizona. I want to trigger it when the agent completes the form because I want the TC, before they approve that transaction, to be able to see all those dates being calculated. I don't want them to have to wait until they approve the transaction to see dates that are calculated, because part of their process is checking those and making sure they're correct. So it's really going to depend on which trigger it is. If it's like a document for compliance trigger, it could probably go either way. If it's a date template, you're probably going to want to trigger it if you have enough information from the agent to trigger it after the agent submits the contract. So it really depends on when you have the appropriate information to trigger it. That's when I would trigger it. If there's nothing else left to be done to trigger that, I trigger it at the earliest possible time. That would be my best practice on that. Yeah, how do you add listener triggers? So yeah, so real easy. You just come in here, add a trigger. It's going to be a field or a field section. So you add or remove a field, go ahead and add that as your trigger. And oh, what happened here? Where'd I go? Okay, so then when it pops in here, you're gonna have to turn this on. So it'll be off naturally when it pops in, and there'll be no condition here as well. So let's go ahead and take that out. So what you do is turn this on as a new trigger. And then you want to create your, you're going to want to create your condition. So if, I don't know, let's just say if property field contract title is not blank, okay, there you go. So if contract title is not blank, what do I want to do? I want this field section to come in, and I want to add it, not remove it. So there you go. So that's all you would do to create that. And now anytime that the contract title is not blank, those fields are going to come in. Now I would create another one for this same field section for if it is blank. So if it's not blank, if it is blank. And that way, if I make a mistake, all I have to do is change it back to the other one and it'll add it back in, delete it, add it back in. So hopefully that explains it. Now this other stuff down here, as you get to be a bigger team and you're working on end-to-end transactions, or you're not working end-to-end with one TC. So typically we see about what 60, 70% of our users, one TC, start to finish, that's how they're doing the transaction. As you grow and start scaling, we see people doing teams. So like 3 people will be working on a transaction. And now I wouldn't have this assigned to all 3 people, but maybe all 3 of these are working together. Being able to assign these to certain people so you know who's sending what out. You know, if nobody's assigned to it, then who's going to do it? You're just relying on someone to hopefully stumble upon this and say, I'll just do it because I know Lois is busy. No, you want to have individually assigned people to each task and to each trigger. And that way there's very standard lines of communication and divisions of responsibility between your team. So nothing's slipping through the cracks and nothing's getting forgotten. So, and then tags, this is for sorting, like I showed you over in the pipelines. You could say, just show me all my triggers that have test 1 Andrew on them. And maybe you're time blocking or doing something like that. So that would be the reason for tags. Before what I explained would be the reason for the assigned to, and then obviously you're adding your conditions so these can become true to trigger whatever this asset is. And this asset in this case happens to be a field section. Yeah. All right, well, I'm sick of talking. I'm glad questions are empty.
I think the only thing I would touch on further, or just I guess clarify for everyone here, is just, I see it a lot in support is the confusion with triggers. Just whether somebody's trying to explain something to us or maybe we're trying to explain something crossed. So I just want to make very clear about, I'd say there's 3 different types of triggers. Task triggers based off of a task being completed or not completed.
Let me show
either way.
Let me see on each one as we go through. So this is task triggers. These are going to be the triggers that live in the task. So this lightning bolt right here is associated when I check off this task, these things, or if I don't check it off by a certain date, these 3 things are going to happen. So 2 days after task is due, when the task isn't complete, send this text reminder that we need to get this earnest money in. Or email, send it as soon as I check off that task, I want this email to fly up to my health bar. Or this template, as soon as I check off the task, I want the template to come up here for me to approve to bring this new template in the transaction. So that's task templates.
Yep, perfect, exactly. So that'd be the 2 events, right? The task being completed, task not being completed. Second one being the intake form condition, or sorry, the intake form triggers. Yep. Because I know people get conditions and triggers kind of confused there. I mean, the form conditions are really just to dynamically update that form when agents are filling it out. Triggers is what happens afterward when it's pushed over for review or it's actually approved. Do something, trigger something.
Yeah, these are triggers in the intake form. So I'm in the form triggers tab. Again, this is like a form builder. These are things that are happening in real time. If this agent answers this question a certain way, I want to add these 2 other fields into the intake form as they're filling it out. This form triggers is what do I want to happen after the intake form is submitted or after the TC approves it. So those are your 2 options here. So when the form is submitted by the agent, now this could be the TC too. So we just put the agent there to, because that's the way most people are using it. And then, or after the agent submits it, when that TC comes in and fills out the remaining fields, when it's approved internally, that's the second phase. So which one do you want? Do you want this trigger to bounce off as soon as the agent hits submit? Or do you want to wait until that TC checks everything and hits the button? And then you have your trigger options, send the email, send the text, do all that stuff. So, yeah. And then what's the last one? We got intake form, and then we got the automated triggers that we talked about before.
Yeah, also known as property triggers, because I know I've heard that particular term come up specifically.
Yeah. Property triggers is a technical name. If you ever talk to me, I always call them automated triggers for some reason. I'm probably confusing people, but they're the same thing. They're in your trigger templates here, and they're listed here as property field template triggers. And if you come in here to look at these are the ones that you don't need to check off a task to execute. These ones are just listening for the conditions to be met for this action or asset to be applied. Cool. Yeah, and you can always reach out to support if you have a question on the triggers, feel free. But yeah, that's probably the number 1 most confusing piece of the language that we use in the program is triggers, because there's so many different types of triggers.
One thing to note, because I know that some people have kind of gotten confused too about the property triggers specifically. Hey, I have task triggers, I have intake form triggers. Where's my property triggers? That is something that we on this team have to enable, because technically it is still in that beta testing phase. So it's not something you'd be able to go to your plans and pricing section and say, oh, I want those automated triggers. It is something that we do have to enable. So if you're not seeing those, send us a message. We could take a look at your account.
Yeah, Leah, you aren't paying the highest amount. I know she had a question on her what do I want to say? Her account type. We haven't released it yet. So the scale plan hasn't been released. It's only on beta for our beta users. At the end of this month, we'll have all the plans out, and you'll be able to upgrade to the scale plan to have these automation or property triggers. So you have the highest plan that's available right now without being on the beta, but that does not include some of these features. So once our beta group, once we've tested everything, made sure that everything's good, Shane is still waiting for DocuSign to approve us, and then we will release the scale plan. So hopefully that clears that up. I know it's a little confusing, and so hopefully that clears all that up. All right, I think we are out of questions. We'll give everyone another 3 minutes to get your final questions in, and then we're hitting the hour mark anyway, so it's actually really good timing. Anyone on the team have anything to add? Anything you're seeing, like Matthew said, in support or implementation anywhere, any major things that keep coming up over and over?
Yeah, so we finally uncovered what the issue with Microsoft was. So if anybody on here is using Microsoft as the API, I don't see any of the participants. Anyways, Microsoft has actually changed their API to only allowing 3 megabytes of files to be sent through any API call. So we've been getting a lot of 413 errors that are returned back, and Microsoft doesn't give much detail around why the error is being sent back, other than the body of the email is too large. And finally uncovered on some random blog post that they had that they did depreciate that down to 3 megabytes from 3.5. They started at 5 megabytes and then went down to 4.5, then to 4, then 3.5, and now they're down to 3. So I imagine here, in the near future, they'll make it 0. So I have no clue why they're doing this, but all API calls going through Microsoft as an email API call, we have to add links as the documents instead of attaching them if it's over 3 megabytes.
Awesome. Yeah. Of course, I'll just keep going down until it upsets everybody.
It's really weird. I don't know why they keep moving it down.
Oh, one thing I did want to mention, may or may not people on here had this issue, but sometimes people will be like, how do I filter this down? This button right here, these are kind of hidden a little bit, not hidden, but a little bit harder to see when you're looking at the main screen. This pops out all your filtering capabilities on all the screens. You'll have this on almost every screen. And then you also have this, and this is going to show you, you can see my tasks, they're getting smaller because I'm not displaying everything. So a lot of people are like, well, how do I, I'll give them a suggestion, like just email from the task. And they're like, well, how do I do that? Well, you probably don't have everything turned on. So now you can come in here and now you have a lot more capability. If you're on the $99 plan, you have this right here. So now you can come in here and you can literally, change your follow-up boss or sky slope, or look at your activity, or you want to go to a document that has to do with this transaction. So this task is with this transaction, and you want to go to the documents. All you have to do is click on documents, and now it'll pull up here. So all these little buttons, we try to put as many places as possible with the health bars so that you guys can quickly get to what you need. You don't have to go all the way back there to send an email. All you have to do is hit the little email button, and now you can send an email from this property right here. So that little filter button there kind of covers that. All right, well, that's the last thing I wanted to mention. Unless anyone has anything else, thanks for being here. Appreciate your time. We will be doing these every Wednesday. We'll probably have more of a formal topic for probably, 3 out of 4 in the month. And then maybe like the last one of the month, we'll probably just do an open question and answer so we can get people's questions answered and get you up to speed on whatever you're having trouble with. So hopefully you guys attend all these Wednesday workshops. They're going to be, I think, a wealth of information for you guys to take it to the next level. So thanks for being here. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys.